Last week, a courtroom in Riverhead, New York erupted in applause. A judge had just sentenced a 62-year-old architect named Rex Heuermann to life in prison without parole for murdering 8 women over 17 years. Families who had waited decades for answers finally had them. The judge told Heuermann, "You are a disgusting, despicable small man, and you are a coward." The room chanted ogre as officers dragged him out. For many people, that was the end of the Gilgo Beach story. It wasn't. Because along that same stretch of Long Island's Ocean Parkway, the same beach, the same remote road, the same buried bodies, there are victims whose killer was never identified. Never charged, never caught. Heuermann is gone, but someone else, possibly more than one person, may still be free. This is the story of the Gilgo Beach victims nobody is talking about. Welcome to Unsounding Journey US. The cases America forgot. We remember. To understand why bodies are still unaccounted for at Gilgo Beach, you need to understand how the whole investigation started. And it started, in a sense, by accident. On May 1st, 2010, a young woman named Shannon Gilbert was driven to a home in Oak Beach, Long Island, to meet a client. Shannon was 23 years old, a sex worker who advertised on Craigslist. By the early hours of the morning, something had gone terribly wrong. Shannon called 911. Audio released years later would reveal what she said in that call. "There is somebody after me." She fled the house. She knocked on neighbors' doors, desperately asking for help. Multiple people called 911 on her behalf. Then she ran into a nearby marsh and was never seen alive again. Police searched for Shannon. What they found instead changed everything. Along a remote stretch of Ocean Parkway, a long, flat road running parallel to the beach on Long Island's South Shore, investigators discovered something no one expected. Bodies buried, wrapped in burlap. By the time the initial searches were complete, police had found the remains of 10 victims. 10 separate people discarded along the same road over what investigators would eventually determine spanned nearly 2 decades. The case became known as the Gilgo Beach murders, and it would take 13 years and a discarded pizza crust before anyone was charged. Rex Heuermann was not who anyone expected. He was 62 years old, a licensed architect with his own firm in Midtown Manhattan. He had been married for years, had 2 grown children, and lived in the same suburban Massapequa Park house he had grown up in. He wasn't a drifter. He wasn't someone with a prior criminal record. He was the kind of person his neighbors would describe as quiet, a little odd but completely unremarkable. Behind that unremarkable exterior, investigators say, was something else entirely. On his devices, authorities found a planning document created in the year 2000, the same year one of his victims was killed, outlining strategies for future murders, how to dispose of bodies, how to avoid leaving DNA evidence, and what supplies would be needed. He kept newspaper clippings about the Gilgo Beach investigation in his own home, following the case that investigators were trying to build against him. He murdered his victims in a basement kill room inside his family home, prosecutors said, while his wife and children were away. He was finally caught in 2022 when investigators linked him to a pickup truck a witness had spotted near one of the crime scenes. Then came the DNA match. From a pizza crust Heuermann threw in a trash can outside his Manhattan office to genetic material found on the victim's remains. In April 2026, he pleaded guilty to 8 murders spanning 17 years. On June 17, 2026, 5 days ago, he was sentenced to life without parole. But here is the question no headline is asking right now. What about the bodies that weren't his? Because here is what investigators confirmed this week, and what almost nobody is reporting right now. Heuermann did not kill everyone found at Gilgo Beach, and whoever did has never been found. When police searched Ocean Parkway and its surrounding areas between 2010 and 2011, they found the remains of 10 people. Rex Heuermann was charged with and admitted to 8 of those deaths. That leaves at least 2 sets of remains found at the same location, connected to no one. And one of those cases is the case that started everything. Shannon Gilbert. Shannon Gilbert was the woman whose disappearance first brought police to Gilgo Beach. She was 23 years old from New Jersey, a mother who was working as an escort to support her young child. On the night of May 1st, 2010, she called 911 in terror from a client's home in Oak Beach. She fled into the marsh. Her remains were found 19 months later, in December 2011. The official cause of Shannon's death was listed as undetermined by the Suffolk County Medical Examiner. Not homicide, not accident, undetermined. Her family commissioned a private autopsy conducted by former New York City medical examiner Dr. Michael Baden. His findings were deeply troubling. He found damage to Shannon's hyoid bone, consistent with strangulation. He also noted that her body was found face up, which is not typical for drowning victims. Her death has never been officially reclassified as murder. Heuermann's own defense attorney has stated that his client was not involved in Shannon's death. But not everyone accepts that either. Shannon's family has never accepted the undetermined ruling. Her mother, Marie Gilbert, who became a passionate advocate for Shannon and the other Gilgo Beach victims, always believed her daughter was murdered. She spent years fighting for a reopened investigation. Marie Gilbert was tragically killed herself in 2016 in a case unrelated to Gilgo Beach before she ever received the answers she fought for. With the primary suspect in the other Gilgo Beach murders now confirmed and sentenced, investigators have still never fully explained what terrified Shannon so badly in that Oak Beach house, or why the evidence on her own body points in a direction nobody has been willing to officially pursue. Asian doe. The second unresolved case is perhaps the most haunting of all, because this victim has never even been identified. In April 2011, investigators found skeletal remains off Ocean Parkway. Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney confirmed in 2024 that the victim was an Asian biological male found wearing women's clothing, a blue-ribbed short-sleeved shirt, women's pants, and a bra. The victim was between 17 and 23 years old, around 5 feet 6 inches tall. Investigators believe they died in 2006 or earlier from blunt force trauma. Because the victim was wearing exclusively women's clothing at the time of death, Tierney said, it is possible that they identified as a woman or were known by others as being a woman. As of today, this person has no confirmed name, no confirmed identity, no confirmed killer. Their remains were found along the same stretch of Ocean Parkway where Heuermann dumped his victims. but Heuermann has never been connected to this death. If the victim was killed by someone else, that person has never been found. In a case that just concluded with life sentences for one killer, this victim still has no justice, not even a name. Not all of the Gilgo Beach cases remain completely unresolved. For years, 2 sets of remains found in 2011 were listed simply as Jane Doe number 3, nicknamed Peaches after a tattoo, and Baby Doe, an unidentified toddler whose remains were found nearby. For more than a decade, these 2 people had no names. In April 2025, with the help of genetic genealogy technology, Nassau County officials and the FBI announced that they had finally identified them. Jane Doe number 3 was Tanya Denise Jackson, a 26-year-old woman from Mobile, Alabama. She was a United States Army veteran, having served from 1993 to 1995. At the time of her death, she and her daughter were living in Brooklyn, estranged from their family. The toddler was her daughter, Tatiana Marie Dykes, just 2 years old, a mother and her 2-year-old child, found on a beach, unnamed for over a decade. Investigators noted that Tanya and Tatiana's deaths did not appear to be connected to the Heuermann killings. A separate suspect was identified. Andrew Dykes, Tatiana's biological father, who was arrested in Florida in December 2025 and charged with Tanya Jackson's murder. But here is the detail that makes this even more disturbing. Investigators said there was insufficient evidence to charge anyone in Tatiana's death. A 2-year-old child was found on a beach. Her killer has never been formally charged. Their case, at least partially, moved toward resolution. But it also confirmed something disturbing. Gilgo Beach was not the work of one man. Multiple people died along that road, at the hands of multiple killers. And not all of those killers have been found. With Heuermann now sentenced, investigators have been direct about what comes next. The Gilgo Beach Task Force, a joint operation between Suffolk County Police, Nassau County Police, and the FBI, has confirmed that the investigation is not over. Authorities believe Heuermann may be connected to additional killings beyond the 8 he admitted to. As part of his plea agreement, Heuermann has agreed to cooperate with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, helping investigators identify other serial killers and potentially revealing information about other cases. What that cooperation will produce, nobody knows yet. But the most pressing open question remains the unidentified Asian doe. Genetic genealogy technology, the same tool that identified Tanya Jackson and Tatiana Dykes, after more than a decade, is now being applied to this case as well. Investigators hope it will eventually produce a name, because without a name, there can be no investigation into who killed them, and without an investigation, there can be no justice. Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney, speaking after Heuermann's sentencing last week, addressed the remaining open cases directly. He said his office remains committed to identifying every victim and pursuing every lead. But he also acknowledged the reality. Some of these cases may never be fully solved. Before we close, there is something important to do. Because in a story this large, with this many victims, this many years, this many headlines, it becomes easy to lose sight of who these women actually were. Heuermann's 8 confirmed victims were Melissa Barthelemy, 24 years old, from Williamsville, New York; Maureen Brainerd Barnes, 25 years old, a mother of 2. Her children were 7 and 1 when she disappeared. They grew up without her. Megan Waterman, 22 years old. From South Portland, Maine, Amberlyn Costello, 27 years old. From North Babylon, New York, Jessica Taylor, 20 years old. From Manhattan. Her cousin told the court this week. She was fierce, kind, compassionate, beautiful, and intelligent. Valerie Mack, 24 years old. She remained unidentified for 20 years before forensic technology gave her back her name. Sandra Costilla, 28 years old, from Trinidad and Tobago. She was killed in 1993, the earliest confirmed victim, meaning Heuermann had been killing for at least 17 years before he was caught. Karen Vergata, 34 years old, a mother of 2. Her partial remains were found separately on Fire Island in 1996. She went unidentified for nearly 30 years. These were real people, real lives, real families who spent years, in some cases decades, not knowing. 1,000,000 years isn't enough, said one family member in that Riverhead courtroom last week. She was right. Rex Heuermann is in prison. Andrew Dykes, charged with killing Tanya Jackson, is awaiting trial. But somewhere, possibly on Long Island or somewhere nearby, the person who killed Asian Doe, a young person between 17 and 23 years old, found in women's clothing on a remote beach, has never been found. Shannon Gilbert's death has never been fully explained to the satisfaction of those who loved her. The Gilgo Beach Task Force continues to work these cases. If you have any information about any of the Gilgo Beach victims, including the still unidentified Asian Doe, the Suffolk County District Attorney's Task Force tip line is 1-800-220-TIPS, 8477. Last week, a courtroom in Riverhead, New York erupted in applause. And it should have. Justice came for 8 women who deserved it. Families got answers they had waited decades for. A judge called a killer exactly what he was. But along that same stretch of Ocean Parkway, there are still people without names, without answers, without justice. One of them is a teenager or a young adult, found in women's clothing on the Winter Beach in 2011. They still have no name, and whoever put them there is still free. This has been Unsounding Journey, U.S. Every case has a story. Not every story has an end. But we will keep searching